Everybody, this is Kimberly from Lakeside Loops. I am really excited to share the pattern for the Hunter Heart Hat with you today. This is a crochet hat, even though the brim looks like knit and the stitches line up so perfectly. I can't wait to show you what techniques were used. In order to follow this video tutorial, you will need to have the written pattern as well. This video tutorial will just cover any of the trickier parts. It's more of a visual aid for the written pattern. So to get the written pattern, you can go to my website, www.lakesideloops.com, and you can find the pattern there for free. You can also download the pattern from Etsy and Ravelry. So to get started, I'll show you how to make this brim. The brim of the hat is worked in rows and then joins together to form a circle, and then the body of the hat is worked up from there. This stitch in particular, I am so excited to share with you. It came to me through a lot of trial and error, and I had to scour the internet to find out if this stitch has been done before in this way and if there was a certain name for it, and I finally found the original name for it, so we'll go over all of that when we come to this part. So again, for this video tutorial to make any sense or to follow along with it, you will need the written pattern. I'm just going to be going over the smallest size of this hat, and I'm just going to be going over certain parts of the hat. So if you want the full instructions, you'll need to get the written copy. So to begin with, we're going to chain 5. Again, I'm making the smallest size. If you're making a bigger size, just have a look at your written pattern. And we're going to slip stitch in the second chain from your hook. So not this one, but this one. And then we're going to slip stitch down the rest of the chain. Now make sure your slip stitches stay loose. If you slip stitch too tightly, which slip stitches have a tendency to do, it'll be harder to work into your stitches in the next round. So I just finished row 1, and to help illustrate where you'll be working into for row 2, I'm going to put a stitch marker in the front loop of my last slip stitch. So again, row 1 is facing me. I haven't turned my work yet to begin row 2, and I've just put a slip stitch in the front loop of my last slip. Did I say slip stitch again? I put a stitch marker, goodness, in the front loop of my last slip stitch. Now that I have you thoroughly confused, for row 2, we're going to turn our work, chain 1, and we're going to slip stitch into the back loop. So now that we've turned our work, this is the back loop, the one that I've put my slip stitch into. Your slip stitches from round 1 sort of face out, and so when you turn, all you can really see is this loop here. So you kind of have to rotate your work back toward you to get into the back loop. And for the first couple of rounds, it's a little bit tricky to get into that stitch. Actually, I'll have to take the stitch marker out. So it's a little bit tricky to get into that back loop for the first couple of rounds, and then it gets easier once you've built up a bit of a base. So once you're a few rows in, goodness, did I say rounds? I'm really not on the ball, guys. The first few rows are a little bit tricky. See, I have to sort of dig this one out. And then after this, it gets a lot easier. So now that I've worked up a few more rows, I'm going to show you again. So you're going to be working into this loop back here. So once I turn my work, I kind of have to rotate it toward me a bit. And you want to keep your slip stitches nice and loose so that they're easy to get into for the next row. This last slip stitch in your row is always a little bit tricky to get into. Like that, and it creates a very stretchy knit-like brim. All right, so I've finished all of my rows. Again, I'm doing the baby size, and I'm going to slip stitch my last row to my first row. And I'm just going to work into the back loops again. All right, so now we're going to begin working in the round, and we're going to be going around the edge of the brim that we just made. The stitch that we're going to be using is something that might be new to you. It's called a double stitch, not a double crochet, a double stitch. And the way it works is you insert your hook to the right of your stitch, or in this case, our rib, and to the left. Once you have 3 loops on your hook, you yarn over and pull through. So we're going to be working in between each rib. There's a little loop there that you can work into easily in between each rib. And before each rib, we're going to yarn over and pull through, and then again after, yarn over and pull through, and then yarn over and pull through both. Essentially it's a slip stitch, essentially it's a single crochet 2 together. You yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through, and yarn over and pull through all 3. It's a slip stitch, or sort of a single crochet 2 together, except that you're working into your previous stitch. So I'm going back into here, yarn over and pull through, and then into the next one, yarn over and pull through, and then I'm going to yarn over and pull through all 3. That is a double stitch. So I'm going to show you again. You're going to work into the stitch before the rib and the stitch after the rib, and the stitch before the rib you've already worked into. So essentially you're working into your previous stitch, yarn over and pull through, and the next stitch, yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through all 3. So one last time, you're going to insert your hook to the right of your rib, to the left of your rib, yarn over and pull through all 3 loops, and that is a double stitch. And it's wonderful because you're working before and after each stitch. It just makes the stitches line up so perfectly. All right, so you'll see in round 1 that about halfway across the front of your hat, you're going to stop and you're going to do a stitch in your contrasting color. A few stitches before, or a couple of stitches before I know I need to make my color change, I start working over top of my contrasting color just so it's locked in place and ready to go for when I need it. So I'm going to hold my contrasting color behind my round, and I'm going to work over it for a couple of stitches just to trap it in behind. Now the stitch before my color change, so the stitch before I need to do the contrasting stitch, I'm going to finish this next stitch using my contrasting color so that it's ready to go for the stitch that I need it on. So I'm going to insert my hook before and after, and instead of yarning over and pulling through with my base color, I'm going to drop that, pick up my contrasting color, and finish that double stitch using my contrasting color. Now this is ready to go for my next double stitch. And again, instead of using my contrasting color, I'm going to drop that and pick up my base color because I know that my next stitch is in my base color. So whatever color your next stitch is what color you should use to finish your current stitch. And I just work over top of this contrasting color stitch for my next stitch, and then that way it's locked in place and ready to go for for the next time I use it. When I come back around, I just like to drop my contrasting color, and then when I come back around, pick it up and pull it over and start using it again. Drop it, pick it up and pull it over, rather than carrying it around with me. I find if I carry it all the way around my work and continue to work over top of it, my hat doesn't have very much stretch. It takes away a lot of the give because this piece that's in behind your row doesn't have any give. So I like to drop it and bring it back and forth. Now I'll show you what the inside looks like. So it's pretty neat and tidy because I just work over top of, when I pull it over, I make sure there's enough slack that when the hat's worn, it'll stretch. And then I work over top of the dropped colors that I have to sort of tie everything in and keep it nice and neat. All right, so I'm at the end of round one, and I just want to show you how your last, or where your last double stitch is worked. So we're going, you can see above each rib, you've created a double stitch. So I've double stitched above all the ribs, and now basically we're going to be creating a double stitch above our seam. So I'm going to insert my hook into my previous stitch, or the stitch before my seam, and I'm going to insert my hook into my first stitch where my stitch marker is, the very first stitch that I made in round one. Yarn over and pull through all three. And that is the last stitch of round one. And I'm going to put a place marker there because we're not going to be doing any joins. We're just going to continuously work in the round. It creates a lot cleaner look in the back, but it'll make it hard to count your stitches if you're not following the chart to create the hat. So by placing a stitch marker there, you'll always know what your last stitch was. So just to show you the double stitch again and how it looks now that we've done one round of double stitches, you're going to insert your hook before your stitch, or essentially in your previous stitch, and again after your stitch. Yarn over and pull through two. So here you can see that's a double stitch. We're going to insert our hook before the stitch and again after the stitch. Yarn over and pull through. Another way of saying that is we're going to insert our hook to the right of the stitch and again to the left of the stitch. Yarn over and pull through. Or another way of saying that is essentially we're going to be single crocheting two stitches together, our previous stitch and our next stitch. So insert your hook, yarn over and pull through, insert your hook, yarn over and pull through, and pull through all three. The reason this isn't creating a decrease is because we're not going into our this stitch and this stitch, we're going into one that we've already worked into and then the next stitch. That's how we're not getting a decrease, and it's allowing these stitches to line up so perfectly over top of each other. So I wanted to show you again what I meant by dropping my contrasting color and pulling it back over when I need it. So you can see I'm about 3 stitches away from, or sorry, I guess 2 stitches away from when I need to change colors again. I'm going to grab my contrasting color that I had dropped before, and I'm going to pull it over to my work. I'm going to make sure to leave some slack so that when the hat is worn, there's room for that to move and it's not too tight. If that's too tight and then someone goes to wear the hat, there won't be enough give there. So I'm going to pull it over this way and I'm going to work over top of it. And then I'm going to grab it and bring it back over, and I'm going to work over top of both the piece that I pulled over and the piece that's running this way. That'll keep everything nice and neat. And actually for this stitch, I'm going to finish it using my contrasting color because I know I need that for my next 3 stitches. So now I'm working over top of my base color and that piece that I pulled back that way. 1, 2, 2, and on my third one, because I know my next stitch is in my base color, I'm actually going to finish this third contrasting stitch using my base color so that it's ready to go for my next stitch. And again, I'm working this stitch over top of my contrasting color so that it's locked and ready to be pulled over for when I need it again. All right, so I'm on round 13. Depending on which size hat you're making, you may have done some extra rounds. For round 13, this is where we're going to start doing our decreases. So we're going to double stitch the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3. So you can see this was my last stitch of my previous round. I've got 1, 2, 3 double stitches. Now we're going to skip one, and that means instead of inserting our hook in here like we normally would and working a double stitch above this stitch, we're going to skip right over to this stitch. So we're not going to insert our hook here like we normally would. We're going to go straight into here and here. So you can see I worked a double stitch above this stitch and a double stitch above this stitch. This little guy got left out. So there's a bit of a small hole here, which you won't really notice when the hat's being worn, because when we gather the top of the hat, as you'll see at the end, that sort of gets hidden when the fabric or the work gets pinched when we seal the top of our hat. So that's 1, 2, 3. So you can see your gap there. 1, 2, 3, and now we're going to skip again. So we're going to skip this stitch, or we're not going to insert our hook into this hole, and we're going to work right into the next stitch. 1, 2, 3. So now that I've finished my hat, I've finished my decreases, there's still a hole at the top of the hat, which obviously you don't want. So I leave a long end, and what I do is I weave that around every couple of stitches around the hole. So I just sort of weave it in and out every couple of stitches around the hole. And then I'm going to just pull that and it'll close up this hole for me. Just like that. Once you've closed up the top of the hat, you can attach either a yarn pom-pom or a faux fur pom-pom. I'm going to do a separate video tutorial that shows you how I make my pom-poms. I've had a lot of requests for that. I used this pom-pom maker and I will link to it in the comments. I'll show you how to do this and how to attach it in the tutorial as well. I hope that you enjoyed this pattern. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to see your finished pieces on social media. You can find me at Lakeside Loops on Instagram and Facebook. Thank you so much for following along. I hope that you enjoyed this design.